Wow, it's me.
Are you a uni student or an early professional with no real time, money, or skills? You've come to the right goddamn place. Welcome to The Bad Chef. Fast and cheap meals for fast and cheap people.
My name is Chi, and I'm a bad chef.
Now, a few people have said to me, Chi, you say it takes 10 minutes to do this thing, and I took 30. Why are you lying to us? And to that I say, I'm sorry. I'm sorry that I get excited about what I'm making and I finish a bit too quickly. But if you also want to get quicker as well, it really comes down to how you organize your cook. Because if you're organized, you'll know where your destination is. If you know where your destination is, you can work out what the procedure is. And then you can cook in parallel, which makes you quicker and more efficient. So we're going to be covering that today. Of course, there's a few bits and pieces to do with basic techniques like how to slice and dice things. But there's also some tips and tricks like using prep bins and using prep bowls and setting up a mise en place before we begin. All this stuff sounds really basic, and you'd be right, it's exactly that. It's not about speed, it's about a bunch of really basic things working together to create efficiency. So, to delve into that today, we're going to be covering a simple recipe that covers all the basic skills required. And that recipe is beef bolognese. And plus, Spag Bol is a staple that everybody should know how to cook, and I'm surprised that I didn't cover this earlier. Anyway, here we are. So, are you ready? Let's go. Let's cook some food.
The first thing you need to do is to plan out what you're doing.
Now, knowing the procedure helps a lot, so have it close by for reference. It's even better if you know it off the top of your dome. But the process really begins when you shop for your ingredients. You have to make sure that you know all the ingredients that you need. So for today, we've got a kilo of beef mince, some carrots, celery, onions, garlic, some plenty red wine, some milk, 2 cans of crushed tomatoes, and also this double concentrated tomato paste. So, the main steps for this procedure would be to season and brown the meat, cook down the veg, add all the liquids, season and reduce, and then slow cook until it's finished. And also, we're going to be serving this with pasta. So, about 10 minutes before our sauce is finished, it's probably worth chucking a bit of pasta into some boiling water so that we have some carbs to eat our sauce with.
The next point in prepping fast is to keep your knives sharp.
Now, sharp knives are easier and safer to use because they'll just drop through whatever you're trying to cut without much force behind it. Less force means less pressure that you have to build up before your knife starts moving, and less pressure means a lower chance of your knife flipping out and causing an accident. Also, a sharper knife means better food as well, because a blunt knife will just crush and bruise your food. A sharp knife will actually cut through whatever you're trying to cut through.
To keep your knives sharp, use a steel to hone your knives ideally before each use, and use a sharpener for when your knives feel a bit dull.
How to use a steel. First, hold the steel in your hand with a confident grip. Keep your fingers behind this guard at all times, right? Then, put the base of the blade towards the bottom end of the steel, use your finger to space out the angle, and then drag the length of the blade across the whole steel. Then, use the other side, space it out using your thumb, and then drag along the length as well. Do it about a dozen times, and then Bob's your uncle. Easy.
As part of our prep, we're going to have to dice up some onions, celery, and carrots, then roughly cut up some garlic. There's an efficient and safe way to do this.
The key to this is not to try to be fast. Don't force yourself. Just go at a rhythm where you feel comfortable and in control. When you're cutting anything, make sure that you hold your knife correctly. And how you do that, use your 2 fingers here to grab the spine of the blade. And then use your other 3 fingers to wrap around the handle like this. This way the knife doesn't wobble around so much. Then with your other hand, form the bear claw, and then use this knuckle over here to guide the knife up and down as you're cutting something. Keep all your other fingers behind the blade as well. And then, to cut, just rock your knife back and forth like it's a choo-choo train, and then you should start cutting very safely and finely. The third thing to form is something called a mise en place. It's basically a fancy way of saying use prep bowls and make them easy to access while you're cooking everything.
Prep bowls will allow you to compartmentalize your workflow, which is very useful since different things take different times to cook. Prep bowls will make it easier to add each ingredient at different stages.
Also, if you're operating with meat, raw meat can contaminate things, so it's probably better to keep it in a prep bowl so it can keep its hands to itself.
You can season and marinate meats in these prep bowls. So today we're just seasoning the beef with some pepper, salt, and garlic powder. Scrunch that shit up until it's all spread evenly. Also, as a small tip, I like to poke my board a bit over into the sink because it's easier and quicker to sweep all the stuff into the prep bowls than to lift it up and dump it in with a knife. Also, it's worth using a prep bin. Using a prep bin for the discarded peels, seeds, and cores saves you all those little trips to the main bin and keeps you more focused on your workspace when time matters.
Honestly, your prep bin can be anything. It could be the plastic tray that your meat came with or another bowl. Use whatever. For me, I'm using this jug with a plastic fruit bag in it. But if you're concerned about Captain Planet and you don't want to use too much plastic, you don't have to line the bin. You can put everything into it. Just empty it out and wash it regularly. Also, most of the stuff from prep is actually compostable, so if you have the means to do it, do that. Now that all the prep's done, we can start cooking. Now when we cook, it's probably a good idea to time your cook so that everything comes out at more or less the same time. And that's a little bit finicky because you have to figure out where in your procedure you can work in parallel to make yourself a little bit more efficient. So, for this example, we have to cook all the piss out of the mince. And that takes about 8 minutes per batch, and we have to do it in 2 batches. The onions take about 10 minutes to caramelize, and then we're going to have to add the celery and carrots afterwards, and they take about 10 minutes to release their water. So this is how we're going to do it. We'll start the onions, we'll cook a batch of mince, we'll put that off to the side, add the celery and carrots, cook another batch of the mince, and when that batch of the mince is done, everything should be ready to go all together into the same pot in time for the milk, wine, and tomatoes to go in. Common sense, right? Easier said than done. So for that reason, use a kitchen timer. It could be a phone, a stopwatch, the oven, just anything to keep you on track.
Okay, let's actually cook now. Brown the onions in a large pot, and while that's browning, cook all the piss out of one batch of the mince. Then, add the garlic, celery, and carrots to the onions and work it around. Cook all the piss out of the second batch of mince, and when all of that is done, dump everything into the same pot. Then, add the wine and boil off the alcohol. Next, add the milk, the cans of tomatoes, and the tomato paste. Then stir to combine, raise to the boil, reduce the heat, and season with salt, pepper, and bay leaf. Then, you can either bung it into an oven at 95 degrees for 3 hours or simmer it on low for 30 to 40 minutes if you don't have the time.
Right, I know you're asking about milk, and I can tell you why. The reason why we're using milk is because it's got a protein inside it that acts as an emulsifier. And what emulsifiers do, it allows fat to be dissolved in water, which is kind of how milk works. So what it's doing in our sauce, it's allowing all the fat-soluble flavors like the garlic and the spices to be dissolved in the main body of water, which consists of mainly tomatoes and red wine. So it allows the fatty flavors to convey through the water, which is nifty. Also, as a bonus effect, milk has a tenderizing effect on meat. So that's another big plus.
The last thing to do now is the pasta. When the sauce is done, put it back in the stove on the lowest heat to bring it back up to temperature and make some final seasoning adjustments. While that's happening, boil some pasta as per the instructions on the packet, then drain it and plate it. Ladle in the sauce, then garnish with some cheese. I'm using Parmesan today, and some green decorative bullshit, and there you go. Spag Bol.
In terms of cost, the whole pot of sauce cost about 20 bucks. I used about $1 worth of pasta, plus some of the other peripheries. Call it a bit shy of $22 for 6 to 8 servings. Boy, that's like $3 per bowl. And if that's not the cheap eat of the millennium, I don't know what is. Anyway, let's eat. Well, this episode was mainly about how to prep quickly, but I'll give you a lowdown on the food. This tastes like a hug from a fat Mediterranean nonna. Eating this feels good. You don't have to worry about fitness or calories or if your colleagues are going to judge you for bringing this into work. In the moment, when you're eating this, it's warming you from the inside out and it feels genuine and earnest. You know what this is? This is good food that doesn't pretend to be anything else. It's not pretentious. It's not even that good looking, to be honest. But it's real. And in a busy and complicated world where it's full of facades and augmented personal brands, sometimes a heap of Spag Bol is just what you need. Kind of like a hug from a fat grandmother. And that's the second week in a row that I've referenced hugs as an analogy to food. I'm not that touch-starved, am I? Surely not. Anyway, this was Spag Bol. Done.
Summer nights can even turn cold. In the streets of Philly where niggas don't even get the turn old. My heart pumping to a turn gold. You niggas stuck in neutral and riding like fuck it, it's a long road. Shit, I'm the one, I'm like the lost soul. In the middle of heaven and hell, see nigga, only God knows. When your time gon' come and your eyes roll straight